We are heading to the United States now. Lots going on with Venezuela, the shooting in Minneapolis, and of course the wish to annex Greenland. US officials have discussed giving up to $175,000 to Greenland citizens to convince them to join the United States. President Donald Trump says the US needs the island as it is rich in minerals needed to advance military applications. What is going on? We're joined by Washington correspondent Simon Marks. Good morning, Simon.
Hello, Anna.
Wow, lots happening over there. Where do we start? Let's start in Greenland at the moment. It's being justified as taking over Greenland because the United States needs to advance military applications. But really, it's about minerals, isn't it?
Well, it's about minerals, and the White House insists about national security, although President Trump falsely states, according to Greenland residents and according to journalists based in Greenland, the prevalence of Chinese and Russian vessels in the waters off Greenland. He says America needs Greenland for its national security. Certainly there's the minerals aspect. There's also another aspect, which is some of the big captains of the tech industry, people like the PayPal co-founder Peter Thiel, have argued that Greenland, with its vast wastelands, could be a useful place for the tech industry to set up the massive server farms that they need, for example, to power artificial intelligence engines. So there are various factors playing into this, coupled with President Trump's determination now to be a strong man on the world stage with his own sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere. That was laid down in the national security strategy that was published shortly before Christmas, and most of Greenland is in the Western Hemisphere. There's a sliver of it that's in the Eastern Hemisphere. The latest version of the story, and it keeps changing, because earlier in the week the White House said that all options were on the table, including the military option. But the latest version of the story is being advanced by Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who argues that President Trump is going to try and buy Greenland. Now, the problem with that version of the story is that when the Republican Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mike Johnson, was asked if that's what Marco Rubio had told lawmakers in a behind-the-scenes closed-door classified briefing about 24 hours ago, Mike Johnson said yes, he remembered Marco Rubio saying something like that, but it was all done with a smile on his face as though it was a bit of a joke. So whether this is really what they're planning to do, we don't know. But the Secretary of State is meeting his Danish opposite number, and reportedly also some officials from Greenland next week. And perhaps we'll see whether we get any clarity, because the Danes, of course, argue it isn't for sale.
Yeah, of course. What about the residents of Greenland? What are their thoughts?
Well, there is absolutely no indication that there is any groundswell of opinion among those residents of Greenland in favour of joining the United States. And remember that the Trump administration has already gone to great lengths to try and lobby them. Donald Trump Jr. has been to Greenland to lobby them. J.D. Vance has been to Greenland to lobby them. Now, what happens if they are indeed offered financial blandishments? I mean, that, of course, could potentially change the equation. But the Danish authorities say, look, there are already agreements in place. The United States has a military base on Greenland. They can expand it if they want to. The former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, who was first in the first Trump administration tasked with trying to buy Greenland, says that Donald Trump is basically making something that is very easy to accomplish, expanded US influence and presence in Greenland, very difficult by insisting that he wants the Stars and Stripes to fly there, because John Bolton argues that there are already enormous options available to the United States to sit down with the Danish authorities and do pretty much whatever they want in Greenland, short of owning it. But as we've seen, in Venezuela as well over the last few days, and with Donald Trump's previous assertions that Canada should become America's 51st state and that Gaza should become part of the United States, he is increasingly all about territorial expansion. And that seems to be driving the Greenland policy.
From Greenland to Venezuela, what is going on there, and what has been the reaction to the US move to capture the Venezuelan president and his wife?
And it's almost easier to tell you what's not going on, because if you listen to what White House officials and the president do not say, it is very telling. They are making absolutely no effort to justify last weekend's intervention in Venezuela on legal grounds. Indeed, in an interview with Donald Trump on Wednesday night that has just dropped on the New York Times, he told 4 reporters from the New York Times that he doesn't believe in international law and that he would be guided instead by what he called his own morality, which he described as the only thing that can stop me. So there's a real threat to all sorts of governments around the world. So they don't justify it on legal grounds at all. They're not calling for fresh elections. They have not offered any kind of path to a future democracy in Venezuela. They haven't demanded that exiled opposition leaders be allowed to return to the country. And they have had absolutely nothing to say about the 863 political prisoners that are still languishing in Venezuela's jails. Instead, what they talk about relentlessly is taking over Venezuela's oil industry. President Trump says between 30 and 50 million barrels of Venezuelan oil will soon be heading to the United States. They believe that they can now exercise maximum leverage over the regime, which is now headed by Nicolas Maduro's former deputy, the new president, Delcy Rodriguez, by seizing and interdicting sanctioned tankers on the high seas, as they did in the waters of the North Atlantic 36 hours ago or so. So this is all in President Trump's mind about, and he said this again in the New York Times interview, indefinitely controlling Venezuela's oil industry. And there's no indication from anything that he's saying that he sees any path to transition. I mean, this is all about the United States being the dominant power in Venezuela, co-opting the government there, forcing it to its knees and threatening it with further military action if President Rodriguez doesn't listen to what he's saying and agree to it.
What does this mean for world order diplomacy and of course, the UN's powers?
Well, I think we're all in a bit of a jam, Anna. I think there's no question about that. I mean, you know, there was a discussion at the United Nations Security Council about what President Trump had done in Venezuela, and that was before he declared in this New York Times interview that he's got no interest in international law. So, you know, it becomes harder and harder, I think, for governments around the world, particularly governments in Europe, you know, worried about his ambitions towards Greenland, that have held back from being overly critical of what happened in Venezuela because they say they've been waiting for the Trump administration to offer its legal justification. Well, guess what? There isn't going to be any legal justification. And what he's indicating in this New York Times interview is that he feels more emboldened than ever before, and he's absolutely determined to throw his weight around on the world stage. He has no interest in the international rules-based system of law. That has completely gone out of the window here. And there are no restraints on him from within his administration, because remember, this time round, as opposed to the first time he was in power, he's not appointed any moderates or anyone who isn't a true believer in his Make America Great Again cause. So it's a big problem.
Just before we go, can we touch on the fatal shooting of the woman in Minneapolis by the ICE agents? Because, you know, this is, I'm reading a lot of headlines. The mood in the States now is not good, especially with the shooting.
extremely brittle, I would say, and the hours ahead in Minneapolis, I think, are going to require some attention. There were some clashes today between protesters and federal agents on the streets. I mean, what we've learned in the last few hours is that the investigation, such as it is going to be, is only going to be led by the FBI. The authorities in Minnesota have been told they are being cut out of the investigation, which has infuriated them. Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota, you'll remember that he ran as Kamala Harris's running mate in the 24 presidential election, says it is very difficult to imagine that the investigation will be fair if only the FBI is conducting it, because President Trump and the Homeland Security Secretary, and within the last couple of hours J.D. Vance, have doubled down on their claim that 37-year-old Nicole Good, who was shot yesterday in her car by an ICE agent, was a professional agitator, part of the lunatic fringe, according to J.D. Vance, someone who was engaged in an act of domestic terrorism, they say, by ramming her car at ICE agents in a bid to stop them from conducting entirely legal law enforcement duties. There is no evidence in the video of what took place at the scene yesterday to support those claims. And there is growing evidence that what they're going to do is cover up the investigation in order to exonerate the ICE agent and drag through the mud the reputation of this 37-year-old mother, whose family say had never participated in any previous anti-ICE protests, even as some local officials in Minnesota say that certainly she had been a dissenter in terms of Donald Trump's policies in government. But she, as I say, is being portrayed as this professional agitator by the White House, and I think that the die is cast for the investigation into her killing.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting one to watch because there certainly is a lot of outrage on the ground there in the US. Simon Marks, thank you so much for joining us on Summer Times.
Cheers, Anna.